right, welcome everybody. Hello there, my name is Kris, this is Wizard Way, and welcome back to Silmarillion Saturdays, where we read through the Silmarillion, because it's a really rough read, and you don't have to do it alone. So, welcome everyone. Everyone say hi in chat. I will take questions throughout, but I will pause occasionally in my reading. Today we are going to cover the Ainulindalë, and maybe if we have time, we'll also do the Valaquenta. Hello Valerian, welcome! Dramora, also welcome. Thank you guys for joining me. So that is going to be the main goal of today, is to, at the very least, get through the Ainulindalë. It's about 8 pages long. Valaquenta is about as long as well, but it is packed with vocabulary. Like, a ridiculous amount of vocabulary. But that's one of the things that I have prepared today. So after I read at least one part of the Silmarillion, I'm going to pause, and then we are going to cover all of the vocabulary that gets listed as we read. So this is my way of adding something a little special, because I particularly love Tolkien's languages. I'm not fluent in Quenya, but I have a pretty strong background in Sindarin, which will come more in handy later on when we're in the Quinta Silmarillion rather than these first couple of books/chapters. But a lot of Quenya in these, so I'm going to break down any names that you might see, because this will give you more context as we go along. If you know what the names mean, they are easier to memorize or remember. So that's what I'm going to be doing after we finish each section. We'll be going through the vocabulary, and I'll break it down for you guys with notes. So this is an allowed reading, but it's also supposed to be a resource for you guys. Hopefully you enjoy it. Let's check out where we're at. So a couple weeks ago, we began with the foreword of the Silmarillion, as well as the preface to the second edition, which talked about any changes that were made to the text, and we concluded it with a letter from J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien. He sent a letter to, I believe his name was Milton? Am I remembering that correctly? Yes, Milton. And that was actually a pretty lengthy letter, so if you missed that and you'd like to learn a little bit more about the background that led to the Silmarillion and how it fits into the larger narrative of Middle-earth, definitely check out that live stream. It is still up on my Twitch channel, and I will be posting it over on YouTube as well. So, if you want background, it will be available to you. All right. This is the letter. All right, here we go. So first things first, there actually is a tiny little illustration here, so I'm going to change my view so you guys can see that. Fun stuff. Oh, my vocabulary's up. Oopsie. Let's get that down here. There we go. Okay, so here is the first illustration. This is just the title page for the Ainulindalë. This is the very, very first part of the Silmarillion, and you can kind of see it's like this ball of energy, or the world, most likely in this case, sort of being brought out of the ether. So, I love this special edition of the Silm is gorgeous. I'm very lucky to have gotten a copy of this. And it's bright orange, just like my shirt. So that is the opening illustration, and let's start, shall we? I'm going to change the view again so that you guys can enjoy what I'm doing. Ooh, things get confusing. Here we go. All right, so the Ainulindalë, let's get started. All right, so the Ainulindalë translates roughly to the music of the Ainur. We will go over vocabulary in a bit, but let's get started with the actual text. The music of the Ainur. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called Ilúvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened, for each comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Ilúvatar called together all the Ainur and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its amazing end. And the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Ilúvatar and were silent. Then Ilúvatar said to them, I don't have my audio filters ready, oops. Then Ilúvatar said to them, of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled in you the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will. But I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song. Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes, and pipes and trumpets, and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Ilúvatar to a great music. And a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depths and into the heights, and the places of the dwelling of Ilúvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made a music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Ilúvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar after the end of days. Then the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played aright and take being in the moment of their utterance. For all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each. And Ilúvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. But now Ilúvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Ilúvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void, places seeking the imperishable flame. For desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own, and it seemed to him that Ilúvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Ilúvatar. But being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord arose about him, and many that sang nigh him grew despondent, and their thought was disturbed, and their music faltered. But some began to attune their music to his rather than to the thought which they had at first. Then the discord of Melkor spread ever wider, and the melodies which had been heard before foundered in a sea of turbulent sound. But Iluvatar sat and hearkened, until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm, as of dark waters that made war upon one another in an endless wrath that would not be assuaged. Then Iluvatar rose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled, and he lifted up his hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme, and it gathered power and had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended with it, and again there was a war of sound more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar rose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others, for it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds in delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. And it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated, and it had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison, as of many trumpets braying upon a few notes. And it essayed to drown the other music by the violence of its voice, but it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its solemn pattern. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Iluvatar shook, and a tremor ran out into the silences yet unmoved, Iluvatar rose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. Then he raised up both hands, and in one chord deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Iluvatar, the music ceased. And we'll pause there for a moment. So that's the first little section. Thank you, Birdman. Appreciate that. Yes, definitely. There are a lot of notes that should likely be taken as you're reading this book. So what we've covered thus far is Iluvatar made the Ainur, which are heavenly beings of his thought. You can think of them as angels if you want to go sort of like the Christian Anglo-Saxon direction with it. But these creatures create and praise, if you will, through the power of song. And they basically take the themes that Iluvatar gives them, and that is what they make music out of. But Melkor, and this is the same one who becomes Morgoth later on, Melkor is considered the greatest of all of the Ainur. And I love that it says he'd been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. So that's one of the wonderful things about him turning more dark, is that he has his hands in everything. There's a little bit of his knowledge in every other thing that the other Ainur sing about, and that's what gives him such great influence. So when when the other Ainur start hearkening to him and basing their music around his theme, that's why it becomes so strong and discordant. But I've always loved this thought that creation came out of music. All right, so let's continue, shall we? And actually, let me get my... I do have voice filters that I'm going to try to use, and we'll see how it goes, but I have one specifically for the Ainur or for Iluvatar. So I'll give it a go, and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, experiment failed. Okay. Alright, just making sure my filters look good. Alright, let's continue. Then Iluvatar spoke, and he said, "Mighty are the Ainur,
and the mightiest among them is Melkor, but that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Iluvatar, those things that ye have sung, I will show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done, and thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined."
Then the Ainur were afraid, and they did not yet comprehend the words that were said to them, and Melkor was filled with shame, of which came secret anger. But Iluvatar arose in splendor, and he went forth from the fair regions that he had made for the Ainur, and the Ainur followed him. But when they were come into the void, Iluvatar said to them,
"Behold your music."
And he showed to them a vision, giving to them sight where before there was only hearing. And they saw a new world made visible before them, and it was globed amid the void. And it was sustained therein, but was not of it. And as they looked and wondered, this new world began to unfold its history, and it seemed to them that it lived and grew. And when the Ainur had gazed for a while, and were silent, Iluvatar said again,
"Behold your music. This is your minstrelsy. This is your minstrelsy, and each of you shall find contained herein, amid the design that I set before you, all those things which it may seem that he himself devised or added. And thou, Melkor, wilt discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but a part of the whole, and tributary to its glory."
And many other things Iluvatar spoke to the Ainur at that time, and because of their memory of his words, and the knowledge that each has of the music that he himself made, the Ainur know much of what was, and is to come, and few things are unseen by them. Yet some things there are that they cannot see, neither alone nor taking counsel together, for to none but himself has Iluvatar revealed all that he has in store. And in every age there come forth things that are new and have no foretelling, for they do not proceed from the past. And so it was that as this vision of the world was played before them, the Ainur saw that it contained things which they had not thought. And they saw with amazement the coming of the children of Iluvatar, and the habitation that was prepared for them. And they perceived that they themselves, in the labor of their music, had been busy with the preparation of this dwelling, and yet knew not that it had any purpose beyond its own beauty. For the children of Iluvatar were conceived by him alone, and they came with the third theme, and were not in the theme which Iluvatar propounded at the beginning, and none of the Ainur had part in their making. Therefore, when they beheld them, and the more did they love them, being things other than themselves, strange and free, wherein they saw the mind of Iluvatar reflected anew, and learned yet a little more of his wisdom, which otherwise had been hidden even from the Ainur. And we'll pause once more. So hopefully, the sound effects on my voice actually worked. We should have no filters at the moment. I thought I'd give it a go. But let's continue. We have a bit more to go. Excuse me. Sweet. Thank you. Thank you, Valerian. I'm trying to keep things straight and make sure I press things properly. Last thing I want is to, keep the Iluvatar voice on for the entirety of it. So we'll see. We'll see how it... Because I can't hear it, I'll have to check it out on the replay and see how it turned out. Alright, thanks for bearing with me, everyone. Yeah, the last thing we need is things straight. No straight things on my live streams. You know me better than that. Hey, over on TikTok. Tale of Turin will always be your favorite. Tale of Turin is really good. And we will eventually get to that. It is in the Quinta Silmarillion. And after I finish the Silmarillion, we may do the extended tales. I have them. And I love the Children of Húrin. Contains my favorite character, actually. My favorite character is Gwyndor. So if you're familiar with that story, you'll know who I'm talking about. He is just the sweetest cinnamon bun of an elf, and he has no luck. Absolutely zero luck. So I pity him, and I want so badly for him to have a better life in Valinor after he's reborn. And we'll get to how that works later on. Alright, so we shall continue. Now the children of Iluvatar are elves and men, the firstborn and the followers, and amid all the splendors of the world, its vast halls and spaces, and its wheeling fires, Iluvatar chose a place for their habitation in the deeps of time, and in the midst of the innumerable stars. And this habitation might seem a little thing to those who consider only the majesty of the Ainur, and not their terrible sharpness, as who should take the whole field of Arda for the foundation of a pillar, and so raise it until the cone of its summit were more bitter than a needle. Or who consider only the immeasurable vastness of the world, which still the Ainur are shaping, and not the minute precision to which they shape all things therein. But when the Ainur had beheld its habitation in a vision, and had seen the children of Iluvatar arise therein, then many of the most mighty among them bent all their thought and their desire toward that place. And of these Melkor was the chief, even as he was in the beginning the greatest of the Ainur who took part in the music. And he feigned, even to himself at first, that he desired to go thither and order all things for the good of the children of Iluvatar, controlling the turmoils of the heat and the cold that had come to pass through him. But he desired rather to subdue to his will both elves and men, envying the gifts with which Iluvatar promised to endow them, and he wished himself to have subjects and servants, and to be called lord, and to be a master over other wills. But the other Ainur looked upon this habitation set within the vast spaces of the world, which the elves call Arda, the earth, and their hearts rejoiced in light, and their eyes beholding many colors were filled with gladness. But because of the roaring of the sea, they felt a great unquiet, and they observed the winds and the air, and the matters of which Arda was made, of iron and stone and silver and gold and many substances. But of all these water they most greatly praised, and it is said by the Eldar that in water there lives yet the echo of the music of the Ainur, more than in any substance else that is in this earth. And many of the children of Iluvatar hearken still unsated to the voices of the sea, and yet know not for what they listen. Now to water had that Ainu whom the elves call Ulmo turned his thought, and of all most deeply he was instructed by Iluvatar in music. But of the airs and winds Manwë most had pondered, who is the noblest of the Ainur. Of the fabric of earth had Owle thought, to whom Iluvatar had given skill and knowledge scarce less than to Melkor. But the delight and pride of Owle is in the deed of making, and in the thing made, and neither in possession nor in his own mastery. Wherefore he gives and hoards not, and is free from care, passing ever on to some new work. And Iluvatar spoke to Ulmo and said,
Seest thou not how here in this little realm, in the deeps of time, Melkor hath made war upon thy province? He hath bethought him of bitter cold immoderate, and yet hath not destroyed the beauty of thy fountains, nor of thy clear pools. Behold the snow, and the cunning work of frost. Melkor hath devised heats and fire without restraint, and hath not dried up thy desire, nor utterly quelled the music of the sea. Behold rather the height and the glory of the clouds, and the ever-changing mists, and listen to the fall of rain upon the earth. And in these clouds thou art drawn nearer to Manwë thy friend, whom thou lovest.
Then Ulmo answered, Truly, water is become now fairer than my heart imagined. Neither had my secret thought conceived the snowflake, nor in all my music was contained the falling of the rain. I will seek Manwë, that he and I may make melodies forever to thy delight. And Manwë and Ulmo have from the beginning been allied, and in all things have served most faithfully the purpose of Iluvatar. And we can pause again. Hey, thank you for the hearts over there on TikTok. Do I think that Eru intended Melkor to become evil? I have my own sort of theory when it comes to Melkor, because I think that all things have their basis in Iluvatar. That's how it was written. And with that in mind, all things eventually come back to him, right? And yes, he's gendered male, and I could talk about that, but I won't. But I think that Iluvatar created Melkor as the greatest of his Ainur. That was intentional. It's very clear that was intentional. And I think that giving him power and desire and ambition those were parts of Iluvatar that he let manifest in Melkor. And again, that was intentional. But I don't think he necessarily understood what ambition could do when it was separated from his own will. Because Iluvatar himself has ambition. He creates the Ainur, and then he gives this theme to them. Like, he has a purpose giving these things to the Ainur, even if it's just the selfish, I want to hear their music. I want to hear the way they take what I give them and make it their own. But part of that is not necessarily perceiving at the beginning what direction that's going to take every single Ainu. So in Melkor's case, I feel that Iluvatar gave him all of the elements that make Melkor Melkor. The ambition, the charisma, the way that he has his hands in every other Ainu's part of the theme. He has knowledge of a little bit of everything, jack of all trades. And with that, it gives him a very different power from the other Ainur. And so, Iluvatar, when he hears the discord, it's sort of at first like he sees a child playing and, making trouble, and at first he's like, oh, that's cute. And then as it gets more violent, something he hadn't necessarily thought of, or thought would happen, hi Alana, he becomes more stern, you know, like, he learns what it is to be a parent, right? To be the creator of something that is not necessarily doing what you intended it to. Alana, please. Please, kitten. Keep moving. She just wants to be near me when I'm talking. But I do think that Melkor, he went a bit more off the rails than I think Iluvatar initially thought. But when you get to the third theme, Iluvatar knows at that point, okay, Melkor is going to make discord. So I know Alana's channeling Melkor. But he knows at that point that Melkor is going to make discord, and so he weaves that into the theme. The third theme incorporates everything that Melkor does. And so Iluvatar, having infinite power and the flame imperishable, he has the power to take anything that he believes is going to come from the Ainur, including Melkor's discord, and weave it into something even more beautiful. It's like when you're painting a canvas. When you're painting a canvas, using dark colors can add to the overall beauty of the image in the end. And you can use the juxtaposition of the lighter colors and the darker colors to create something more than what they would have been on their own. So that same sort of, I believe it's called chiaroscuro, that juxtaposition of light and dark, Iluvatar immediately catches on to that and uses it to the overall theme's benefit. So once you hit the third theme, he knows that Melkor is going to do all this, and he doesn't stop him. But he just sort of makes that into the moral lesson of, you know, any discord that you sow will only eventually add to the overall theme. Everything has its source in me, including the discord, because I gave you that. I gave you that ability. I gave you that power. So, in the end, Iluvatar's the one in charge. And that's what he's basically saying throughout this. That he's the one in charge, and Melkor can rage all he wants, because at this point, Iluvatar knows that that's what he's gonna do. And he makes that part of the theme. So yeah, in his own way, I feel like Iluvatar allowed it. I don't think he initially intended for ambition and knowledge to be used that way, but the moment it was independent of him, it morphed into something that he hadn't necessarily anticipated in Melkor. But he didn't find it, he didn't find it ugly. He didn't find it worth destroying. He allows Melkor to continue. And so, in his own way, he's saying, the darkness has a purpose, and I'm cool with it. So that is sort of a philosophical kind of question that we do ask ourselves as we go. If everything is fated, if everything was intended by Iluvatar, then what kind of god does that make him? And you can answer that yourselves. But it's an interesting thought. If he knows that evil exists and he allows it, what does that make Iluvatar? Thank you, Valerian. I give a lot of thought to this, but it's because I like nuanced bad guys in my books. So I appreciate giving more depth to Melkor. That Melkor rebelled because he was made to rebel. And also the thought that if it hadn't been him that rebelled, that made discord and made something deeper out of the music, it could have been one of the other Ainur. And when you think about, what would have happened if this one went bad? It gets really, really fascinating. So, I like having fun with that. We won't get into the other Ainur until we hit the Valaquenta, but that gives us a little bit to go on. Alright, so we had just finished with Manwë and Ulmo becoming besties and allies and making rain and clouds and such. Yes, Sauron was one of the corrupted Ainur. He isn't considered a Vala. He's one of the Mayar. So slightly lesser in power and scope. But we'll get to him as well as we continue. Okay. But even as Ulmo spoke, and while the Ainur were yet gazing upon his vision, it was taken away and hidden from their sight. And it seemed to them that in that moment they perceived a new thing, darkness, which they had not known before except in thought. But they had become enamored of the beauty of the vision and engrossed in the unfolding of the world, which came there into being. And their minds were filled with it, for the history was incomplete, and the circles of time not full wrought when the vision was taken away. And some have said that the vision ceased ere the fulfillment of the dominion of men and the fading of the firstborn. Wherefore, through the music... Oh, pardon me, I'm messing this up. Let's go back a bit. For the history was incomplete and the circles of time not full wrought when the vision was taken away. And some have said that the vision ceased ere the fulfillment of the dominion of men and the fading of the firstborn. Wherefore, though the music is over all, the Valar have not seen as with sight the later ages or the ending of the world. Then there was unrest among the Ainur, but Ilúvatar called to them and said,
I know the desire of your minds, that what ye have seen should verily be, not only in your thought, but even as ye yourselves are, and yet other. Therefore I say, Ea, let these things be, and I will send forth into the void the flame imperishable, and it shall be at the heart of the world, and the world shall be. And those of you that will may go down into it.
And suddenly the Ainur saw afar off a light. Afar off a light. As it were a cloud with a living heart of flame, and they knew that this was no vision only, but that Ilúvatar had made a new thing, Ea, the world that is. Thus it came to pass that of the Ainur some abode still with Ilúvatar beyond the confines of the world, but others, and among them many of the greatest and most fair, took the leave of Ilúvatar and descended into it. But this condition Ilúvatar made, or it is the necessity of their love, that their power should thenceforth be contained and bounded in the world, to be within it forever, until it is complete, so that they are its life and it is theirs. And therefore they are named the Valar, the powers of the world. But when the Valar entered into Ea, they were at first astounded and at a loss, for it was as if naught was yet made which they had seen in vision, and all was built on point to begin, and yet unshaped, and it was dark. For the great music had been but the growth and flowering of thought in the timeless halls, and the vision only a foreshadowing. Only a foreshowing. But now they had entered in at the beginning of time, and the Valar perceived that the world had been but foreshadowed and foresung, and they must achieve it. So began their great labors in wastes unmeasured and unexplored, and in ages uncounted and forgotten, until, in the deeps of time, and in the midst of the vast halls of Ea, there came to be in that hour, and that place, where was made the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar. And in this work the chief part was taken by Manwë and Owle and Ulmo, But Melkor too was there from the first, and he meddled in all that was done, turning it, if he might, to his own desires and purposes, and he kindled great fires. When therefore earth was yet young and full of flame, Melkor coveted it. And he said to the other Valar, "This shall be my own kingdom, and I name it unto myself." But Manwë was the brother of Melkor in the mind of Iluvatar, and he was the chief instrument of the second theme that Iluvatar had raised up against the discord of Melkor. And he called unto himself many spirits, both greater and less, and they came down into the fields of Arda and aided Manwë, lest Melkor should hinder the fulfillment of their labor forever, and earth should wither ere it flowered. And Manwë said unto Melkor, "This kingdom thou shalt not take for thine own, wrongfully, for many others have labored here no less than thou." And there was strife between Melkor and the other Valar, and for that time Melkor withdrew and departed to other regions, and did there what he would. But he did not put the desire of the kingdom of Arda from his heart. Now the Valar took to themselves shape and hue, and because they were drawn into the world by love of the children of Iluvatar, for whom they hoped, they took shape after that manner which they had beheld in the vision of Iluvatar, save only in majesty and splendor. Moreover, their shape comes of their knowledge of the visible world, rather than of the world itself, and they need it not, save as we use raiment. And yet we may be naked and suffer no loss of our being. Therefore the Valar may walk, if they will, unclad, and then even the Eldar cannot clearly perceive them, though they be present. But when they desire to clothe themselves, the Valar take upon them forms, some as of male and some as of female, for that difference of temper they had even from the beginning, and it is but bodied forth in the choice of each, not made by the choice, even as with us male and female may be shown by the raiment, but is not made thereby. But the shapes wherein the great ones array themselves are not at all times like to the shapes of the kings and queens of the children of Iluvatar, for at times they may clothe themselves in their own thought, made visible in forms of majesty and dread. And the Valar drew unto them many companions, some less, some well nigh as great as themselves, and they labored together in the ordering of the earth and the curbing of its tumults. Then Melkor saw what was done, and that the Valar walked on earth as powers visible, clad in the raiment of the world, and were lovely and glorious to see, and blissful, and that the earth was becoming as a garden for their delight, for its turmoils were subdued. His envy grew then the greater within him, and he also took visible form, but because of his mood and the malice that burned in him, that form was dark and terrible. And he descended upon Arda in power and majesty greater than any of the other Valar. As a mountain that wades in the sea, and has its head above the clouds, and is clad in ice, and crowned with smoke and fire, and the light of the eyes of Melkor was like a flame that withers with heat and pierces with a deadly cold. Thus began the first battle of the Valar with Melkor for the dominion of Arda, and of those tumults the elves know but little, for what has there been declared is come from the Valar themselves, with whom the Eldar spoke in the land of Valinor, and by whom they were instructed. But little would the Valar ever tell of the wars before the coming of the elves, yet it is told among the Eldar that the Valar endeavored ever, in despite of Melkor, to rule the earth and to prepare it for the coming of the firstborn. And they built lands, and Melkor destroyed them. Valleys they delved, and Melkor raised them. Mountains they carved, and Melkor threw them down. Seas they hollowed, and Melkor spilled them. And naught might have peace or come to lasting growth, For as surely as the Valar began a labor, so would Melkor undo it or corrupt it. And yet their labor was not all in vain, and though nowhere and in no work was their will and purpose wholly fulfilled, and all things were in hue and shape other than the Valar had first intended, slowly, nonetheless, the earth was fashioned and made firm. And thus was the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar established at the last in the deeps of time, and amidst the innumerable stars. Thus concludes the Ainulindalë. So, as you can tell, the wording that Tolkien uses is a bit different. It reads more like a history or a theological text, which is fine, but that's how it is. Alright, I do have another illustration I can share, so we'll change the scene here really quickly so that you guys can see it. Oop, I pressed the wrong one. My bad. It should be this one. Just kidding. Okay. There we go. So this is the first plate or illustration. Shout out to Ted Nasmith, who did, I believe, all of the illustrations in this version of the illustrated Silmarillion. So here is the great mountain amidst the sea. And I'm not sure, let's look at the beginning and see, what did they name this plate? Plates. Just the sea. It is titled The Sea. So there is that. It really is a beautiful painting. Try and zoom in for you guys. Just so you can see it more fully. Beautiful illustrations. And my little camera here doesn't do it justice. It's a very deep sort of cobalt blue. It's like cobalt and navy blue. So that is the first illustration we've got, and since I've got the camera on, here is the illustration of the Valaquenta title page. So here we have a dwelling on the mountaintops. And to my knowledge, and this is a guess on my part, to my knowledge, this is meant to be Taniquetil. Or Taniquetil. I think it's probably Taniquetil. But that is the highest peak in all of Arda. And that is where Manwë and Varda, two of the greatest Valar, arguably, that is where they dwell. So, Valaquenta is the account or history of the Valar. And I apologize in advance, you guys, because this is where all the vocabulary comes in. If you thought the Ainulindalë was bad, the Valaquenta is worse. But let's change it over again, I think, and we'll do the actual reading. The Vanyar live on that mountain, yes. Yes, later on, once the Eldar take the great journey and a lot of them come over the sea, which we'll cover once we hit the Silmarillion, the Quinta Silmarillion, the Vanyar do take up residence, at least in part, but I think most of them go up on the mountain to Taniquetil. Who's the most interesting Valar? That's a tough one. I mean, if you count Melkor as part of the Valar, which I don't believe they do technically, if Melkor is included, I definitely find him the most interesting, as I often do. I like the bad guys, okay? That's why I'm wearing a Team Aratar shirt here. Available on the links in my bio. I do have a bunch of different Tolkien shirts. The orange one here is just one of the colors you can get, but this is my team Anatar. Anatar being one of the other names that Sauron takes, which we will hopefully see in the Amazon series. But other than Melkor, Namo. I would say Namo. And we haven't hit who Namo is yet. That'll come in here in the Valaquenta. But Namo is the judge, sort of the Lord of the Dead. But he's also he's the Vala that has dominion over time. And so he sees and knows all things. Except for, like, a couple rare things that Iluvatar didn't reveal to anyone. Other than that, Namo is the one who remembers the entire theme. He remembers every single detail of the vision that was put forth. Yes, that is Mandos. Namo is his real name. Mandos is actually the name of his dwelling, but it's the name that he's most often referred to as. Same with Lorien. Lorien's name is Irmo. He is the Grim Reaper, basically. There's a different feel to Namo than you would think of just the Grim Reaper. But I always found Namo to be a very fascinating character. You know, you have a character who knows everything that's going to happen, and yet refuses to alter it in any way. He himself takes a bit of a back seat, and the sort of strain that would create on most is just palpable. Knowing everything and not being able to do anything about it. And wondering, in my head at least, does that affect him? Or was he created in a way that it doesn't affect him? I like to think that it does affect him. It takes a toll. But that's his purpose. That's what he is. So it's not something he can turn away from, but it's something that he is uniquely built to handle. So I like the concept of Namo. And that, you know, he cares for all of these poor traumatized souls as they come into Mandos. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We don't know who these people are yet if you haven't read the books, so we'll get there. But let's start on the Valaquenta. I'm going to switch back to my just chatting. Okay. To my knowledge, I'll look ahead very quickly just to see if there's any dialogue I need to worry about. I don't think there is. Because this is like the history index right here. The Valaquenta is very specifically all of the information you could ever really want about the Valar. The basics. And it's about the same length as the Ainulindalë. Why do they have different names? Because there are multiple languages in Tolkien's world. That's why. So they end up with multiple names. And we will hit those as soon as we finish the Valaquenta. I will bring up all of my vocabulary and I'll fully explain that. So that's coming. Stay tuned. All right, moving on to the Valaquenta. Account of the Valar and Mayar according to the lore of the Eldar. The Eldar being the elves. In the beginning, Eru, the One, who in the Elvish tongue is named Iluvatar, made the Ainur of his thought, and they made a great music before him. In this music the world has begun, for Iluvatar made visible the song of the Ainur, and they beheld it as a light in the darkness. And many among them became enamored of its beauty, and of its history, which they saw beginning and unfolding as in a vision. Therefore Iluvatar gave to their vision being, and set it amid the void, and the secret fire was sent to burn at the heart of the world, and it was called Ea. Then those of the Ainur who desired it arose and entered into the world at the beginning of time, and it was their task to achieve it, and by their labors to fulfill the vision which they had seen. Long they labored in the regions of Ea, which are vast beyond the thought of elves and men, until in the time appointed was made Arda, the kingdom of earth. Then they put on the raiment of earth and descended into it and dwelt therein. And that is basically a condensed version of the Ainulindalë right there. So that is basically the beginning. That is the creation myth. Moving on. Of the Valar. The great among these spirits the elves name the Valar, the powers of Arda, and men have often called them gods. The lords of the Valar are 7, and the Valier, the queens of the Valar, are 7 also. 14 total. These were their names in the Elvish tongue as it was spoken in Valinor, though they have other names in the speech of elves in Middle-earth, and their names among men are manifold. Kitten. Pardon me. Cat troubles. Move, please. You just want to be in all the action, don't you? Spoiled kitten. Okay, let's try that again. And their names among men are manifold. The names of the lords in order are Manwe, Ulmo, Owle, Oromay, Mandos, Lorien, and Tulkas. And the names of the queens are Varda, Yavanna, Nienna, Este, Vaire, Vanna, and Nessa. Melkor is counted no longer among the Valar, and his name is not spoken upon earth. Except by me, apparently, because we're getting meta. Manwe and Melkor were brethren in the thought of Ilúvatar. The mightiest of those Ainur who came into the world was in his beginning Melkor, but Manwe is dearest to Ilúvatar and understands most clearly his purposes. He was appointed to be, in the fullness of time, the first of all kings, lord of the realm of Arda and ruler of all that dwelt therein. In Arda his delight is in the winds and the clouds, and in all the regions of the air, from the heights to the depths, from the utmost borders of the vale of Arda to the breezes that blow in the grass. Sulimo he is surnamed, lord of the breath of Arda. All swift birds, strong of wing, he loves, and they come and go at his bidding. Hey, over on TikTok, thank you so much. Thank you, Angel. Join me over on Twitch. We are reading the Silmarillion. We are on the Valaquenta. Okay, so all birds come and go at Manwe's bidding. With Manwe dwells Varda, Lady of the Stars, who knows all the regions of Ea. Too great is her beauty to be declared in the words of men or of elves, for the light of Ilúvatar lives still in her face. In light is her power and her joy. Out of the deeps of Ea she came to the aid of Manwe, for Melkor she knew from the beginning. For Melkor she knew from before the making of the music and rejected him, and he hated her, and feared her more than all others whom Eru made. Rejected. Manwe and Varda are seldom parted, and they remain in Valinor. Their halls are above the everlasting snow, upon Oyolose, the uttermost tower of Taniquetil, tallest of the mountains upon earth. So, Oyolose upon Taniquetil. And again, Taniquetil is the tallest of all mountains upon earth. When Manwe there ascends his throne and looks forth, if Varda is beside him, he sees further than all other eyes, through mist and through darkness, and over the leagues of the sea. And if Manwe is with her, Varda hears more clearly than all other ears the sound of voices that cry from east to west, from the hills and the valleys, and from the dark places that Melkor has made upon earth. Pardon me. Of all the great ones who dwell in this world, the elves hold Varda most in reverence and love. Elbereth they name her, and they call upon her name out of the shadows of Middle-earth, and uplift it in song at the raising of the stars. Ulmo is the lord of waters. He is alone. He dwells nowhere long, but moves as he will in all the deep waters about the earth or under the earth. He is next in might to Manwë, and before Valinor was made, he was closest to him in friendship. But thereafter he went seldom to the councils of the Valar, unless great matters were in debate. For he kept all Arda in his thought, and he has no need for any resting place. Moreover, he does not love to walk upon land, and will seldom clothe himself in a body after the manner of his peers. If the children of Eru beheld him, they were filled with a great dread, for the arising of the king of the sea was terrible, as a mounting wave that strides to the land, with dark helm foam-crested and raiment of mail shimmering from silver down into shadows of green. The trumpets of Manwë are loud, but Ulmo's voice is deep as the deeps of the ocean, which he only has seen. Nonetheless, Ulmo loves both elves and men, and never abandoned them, not even when they lay under the wrath of the Valar. At times he will come unseen to the shores of Middle-earth, or pass far inland up firths of the sea, and there make music upon his great horns, the Ulamuri, that are wrought of white shell. And those to whom that music comes hear it ever after in their hearts, and longing for the sea never leaves them again. But mostly Ulmo speaks to those who dwell in Middle-earth with voices that are heard only as the music of water, for all seas, lakes, rivers, fountains, and springs are in his government, so that the elves say that the spirit of Ulmo runs in all the veins of the world. Thus news comes to Ulmo, even in the deeps, of all the needs and griefs of Arda, which otherwise would be hidden from Manwë. Owle has might little less than Namo. Sorry, not Namo, Ulmo. You will see I mix up their names a lot. Owle has might little less than Ulmo. His lordship is over all the substances of which Arda is made. In the beginning he wrought much in fellowship with Manwë and Ulmo, and the fashioning of all lands was his labor. He is a smith and a master of all crafts, and he delights in works of skill, however small, as much as in the mighty buildings of old. His are the gems that lie deep in the earth, and the gold that is fair in the hand, no less than the walls of the mountains and the basins of the sea. The Noldor learned most of him, and he was ever their friend. Melkor was jealous of him, for Owle was most like himself in thought and in powers, and there was long strife between them, in which Melkor ever marred or undid the works of Owle, and Owle grew weary in repairing the tumults and disorders of Melkor. It's a very bad codependent relationship. Not healthy, red flags. Both also desired to make things of their own that should be new and unthought of by others, and delighted in the praise of their skill. But Owle remained faithful to Eru and submitted all that he did to his will. And he did not envy the works of others, but sought and gave counsel, whereas Melkor spent his spirit in envy and hate, until at last he could make nothing save in mockery of the thought of others, and all their works he destroyed if he could. The spouse of Owle is Yavanna, the giver of fruits. She is the lover of all things that grow in the earth, and all their countless forms she holds in her mind, from the trees like towers in forests long ago, to the moss upon stones, or the small and secret things in the mold. In reverence, Yavanna is next to Varda among the queens of Valar. In the form of a woman, she is tall and robed in green, but at times she takes other shapes. Some there are who have seen her standing like a tree under heaven, crowned with the sun, and from all its branches there spilled a golden dew upon the barren earth, and it grew green with corn. But the roots of the tree were in the waters of Ulmo, and the winds of Manwë spoke in its leaves. Feyen Turi, queen of the earth, she is surnamed in the Eldarin tongue. The Feyen Turi, masters of spirits, are brethren, and they are called most often Mandos and Lorien. Yet these are rightly the names of the places of their dwelling, and their true names are Namo and Irmo. Namo, the elder, dwells in Mandos, which is westward in Valinor. He is the keeper of the houses of the dead, and the summoner of the spirits of the slain. He forgets nothing, and he knows all things that shall be, save only those that lie still in the freedom of Iluvatar. He is the doomsman of the Valar, but he pronounces his dooms and his judgments only at the bidding of Manwë. Vaire, the weaver, is his spouse, who weaves all things that have ever been in time into her storied webs, and the halls of Mandos that ever widen as the ages pass are clothed with them. Irmo, the younger, is the master of visions and dreams. In Lorien are his gardens, in the land of the Valar, and they are the fairest of all places in the world, filled with many spirits. Este, the gentle healer of hurts and weariness, is his spouse. Gray is her raiment, and rest is her gift. She walks not by day, but sleeps upon an island in the tree-shadowed lake of Lorelin. That is a period. But sleeps upon an island in the tree-shadowed lake of Lorelin. From the fountains of Irmo and Este, all those who dwell in Valinor draw refreshment, and often the Valar come themselves to Lorien and there find repose and easing of the burden of Arda. Mightier than Este is Nienna, sister of the Feyen Turi. She dwells alone. She is acquainted with grief, and mourns for every wound that Arda has suffered in the marring of Melkor. So great was her sorrow as the music unfolded, that her song turned to lamentation long before its end, and the sound of mourning was woven into the themes of the world before it began. But she does not weep for herself, and those who hearken to her learn pity and endurance in hope. Her halls are west of west, upon the borders of the world, and she comes seldom to the city of Valimar, where all is glad. She goes rather to the halls of Mandos, which are near to her own, and all those who wait in Mandos cry to her, for she brings strength to the spirit and turns sorrow to wisdom. The windows of her house look outward from the walls of the world. Greatest in strength and deeds of prowess is Tulkas, who is surnamed Astaldo, the Valiant. He came last to Arda to aid the Valar in the first battles with Melkor. He delights in wrestling and in contests of strength, and he rides no steed, for he can outrun all things that go on feet, and he is tireless. His hair and beard are golden, and his flesh ruddy. His weapons are his hands. He has little heed for either the past or the future, and is of no avail as a counselor, but is a hardy friend. His spouse is Nessa, the sister of Oromay, and she also is lithe and fleet-footed. Deer she loves, and they follow her train whenever she goes in the wild. But she can outrun them, swift as an arrow with the wind in her hair. In dancing she delights, and she dances in Valimar on lawns of never-fading green. Oromay is a mighty lord. If he is less strong than Tulkas, he is more dreadful in anger, whereas Tulkas laughs ever, in sport or in war, and even in the face of Melkor he laughed in battles before the elves were born. Oromay loved the lands of Middle-earth, and he left them unwillingly and came last to Valinor, and often of old he passed back east over the mountains and returned with his host to the hills and the plains. He is a hunter of monsters and fell beasts, and he delights in horses and in hounds, and all trees he loves, for which reason he is called Aldoron, and by the Sindar Tauron, both of which mean the Lord of Forests. Pardon me. Nahar is the name of his horse, white in the sun and shining silver at night. The Valaroma is the name of his great horn, the sound of which is like the upgoing of the sun in scarlet, or the sheer lightning cleaving the clouds. Above all the horns of his host, it was heard in the woods that Yavanna brought forth in Valinor. For there Oromay would train his folk and his beasts for the pursuit of the evil creatures of Melkor. The spouse of Oromay is Vanna, the ever-young. She is the younger sister of Yavanna. All flowers spring as she passes, and open if she glances upon them, and all birds sing at her coming. Think Snow White. It's very similar. These are the names of the Valar and the Valier, and there is told in brief their likenesses, such as the Eldar beheld them in Aman. But fair and noble as were the forms in which they were manifest to the children of Ilúvatar, they were but a veil upon their beauty and their power. And if little is here said, and if little is here said of all that the Eldar once knew, that is as nothing compared with their true being, which goes back into regions and ages far beyond our thought. Among them 9 were of chief power and reverence, but 1 is removed from their number and 8 remain. And here we go with a list. So these are the 8. Okay. Among them 9 were of chief power and reverence, but 1 is removed from their number and 8 remain, the Aratar, or the High Ones of Arda. Manwë and Varda, Ulmo, Yavanna and Owle, Mandos, Nienna, and Oromay. Though Manwë is their king and holds their allegiance under Eru, in majesty they are all peers, surpassing beyond compare all others, whether of the Valar and the Mayar, or of any other order that Ilúvatar has sent into Ea. And we'll pause there. So there is all of the crazy information about the Valar. Condensed. Am I a boy or a girl? Yes. Why do they have different names? Oh, I did mention that before. It's because there are a lot of different languages, and just like we give names that are very descriptive to whatever heavenly beings we're talking about, so too did the elves, the Eldar. So they gave them various names, and we will go through them. Let's move on. So next we'll be covering the Mayar and then the enemies, and then we'll be done. We'll do all the vocab. Of the Mayar. With the Valar came other spirits, whose being also began before the world, of the same order as of the Valar, but of less degree. These are the Mayar, the people of the Valar, and their servants and helpers. Their number is not known to the elves, and few have names in any of the tongues of the children of Ilúvatar, for though it is otherwise in Aman, in Middle-earth the Mayar have seldom appeared in form visible to elves and men. Chief among the Mayar of Valinor, those named are remembered in the histories of the elder days, are Ilmare, the handmaiden of Varda, and Eonwë, the banner-bearer and herald of Manwë, whose might in arms is surpassed by none in Arda. But of all the Mayar, Owle and Uinen are best known to the children of Ilúvatar. Owle is a vassal of Ulmo, and he is master of the seas that wash the shores of Middle-earth. He does not go in the deeps, but loves the coasts and the isles, and rejoices in the winds of Manwë, for in storm he delights, and laughs amid the roaring of the waves. His spouse is Uinen, the Lady of the Seas, whose hair lies spread through all waters under sky. All creatures she loves that live in the salt streams, and all weeds that grow there. To her mariners cry, for she can lay calm upon the waves, restraining the wildness of Owle. The Númenóreans lived long in her protection, and held her in reverence equal to the Valar. Melkor hated the sea. What doesn't Melkor hate? Melkor hated the sea, for he could not subdue it. It is said that in the making of Arda he endeavored to draw Owle to his allegiance, promising to him all the realm and power of Ulmo if he would serve him. So it was that long ago there arose great tumults in the sea that wrought ruin to the lands. But Uinen, at the prayer of Owle, restrained Owle and brought him before Ulmo, and he was pardoned and returned to his allegiance, to which he has remained faithful. For the most part, for the delight in violence has never wholly departed from him, and at times he will rage in his willfulness without any command from Ulmo, his lord. He's tempestuous. Therefore, those who dwell by the sea or go up in ships may love him, but they do not trust him. Melian was the name of a Maya who served both Vana and Este. She dwelt long in Lórien, tending the trees that flower in the gardens of Irmo, ere she came to Middle-earth. Nightingales sang about her wherever she went. Wisest of the Mayar was Olorin. He too dwelt in Lórien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nienna, and of her he learned pity and patience. Of Melian much is told in the Quinta Silmarillion, but of Olorin that tale does not speak, for though he loved the elves, he walked among them unseen, or in form as one of them, and they did not know whence came the fair visions or the promptings of wisdom that he put into their hearts. In later days, he was the friend of all the children of Ilúvatar, and took pity on their sorrows, and those who listened to him awoke from despair and put away the imaginations of darkness. Oh my goodness, I have bots galore. One moment, guys. I obviously need to deal with this. My goodness. Wow. Give me a moment. I apologize. Yeah, I know you're not a bot. Thank you to Great Claw. Gosh. This is terrible. I won't ban you, Claw. No worries. I really need to set up filters for this, because that is terrible. Gee. This is so annoying. my gosh, they just keep coming. Oh, why? Oh my gosh. I apologize anyone who's dealing with this on the live. I'm trying to take care of it as quickly as I can. Fun times. Okay. I think I got them all. Well, that's the first time that's happened. Good lord. Thank you to anyone who's still watching. Sorry about that. I don't have a bot yet to take care of those things. Alright, shall we continue? We are almost finished. Okay. So we just talked about Melian and Aldoron. Aldoron is later known as Gandalf, so you guys know who that guy is. But his original name, as one of the Mayar, was Aldoron. Alright, so that was about the Mayar. Of the enemies. Last of all is set the name of Melkor, he who arises in might. But that name he has forfeited, and the Noldor, who among the elves suffered most from his malice, will not utter it, and they name him Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world. Great might was given to him by Iluvatar, and he was coeval with Manwë, or, equal in power, coeval. In the powers and knowledge of all the other Valar he had part, but he turned them to evil purposes and squandered his strength in violence and tyranny, for he coveted Arda and all that was in it, desiring the kingship of Manwë and dominion over the realms of his peers. From splendor he fell through arrogance to contempt for all things save himself, a spirit wasteful and pitiless. Understanding, he turned to subtlety, in perverting to his own will all that he would use, until he became a liar without shame. He began with the desire of light, but when he could not possess it for himself alone, he descended through fire and wrath into a great burning, down into darkness. And darkness he used most in his evil works upon Arda, and filled it with fear for all living things. Yet so great was the power of his uprising that in ages forgotten he contended with Manwë and all the Valar, and through long years in Arda held dominion over most of the lands of the earth. But he was not alone, for of the Mayar many were drawn to his splendor in the days of his greatness, and remained in that allegiance down into his darkness. And others he corrupted afterwards to his service with lies and treacherous gifts. Dreadful among these spirits were the Valaraukar. It's a tough one. The scourges of fire that in Middle-earth were called the Balrogs, demons of terror. Among those of his servants that have names, the greatest was that spirit whom the Eldar called Sauron, or Gorthaur the Cruel. In his beginning he was of the Mayar of Owle, and he remained mighty in the lore of that people. In all deeds of Melkor, the Morgoth upon Arda, in his vast works and in the deceits of his cunning, Sauron had a part, and was only less evil than his master, in that for long he served another and not himself. But in after years he arose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. Here ends the Valaquenta. Alright, so there we go. Like I said, it's very vocabulary heavy, but those are the opening books, if you will, of the Silmarillion, followed quickly by the actual Quinta Silmarillion, which we will start next week. But for now, we have finished the Ainulindalë, as well as the Valaquenta, and let's hit vocabulary. So this is where you guys will learn all about what the names actually mean in the languages that Tolkien created. Everything has etymology. So Tolkien created this vast network of languages, and from those languages are all of the names that he uses in his books. So we'll go through it. All right, where is it? Here we go. All right. So I do know that this is just my camera here, but we're going to cover it. We're going to cover it with my notepad. Actually, let me shift that around a little bit. I don't know why this isn't... Whoa, hello. Oh my gosh. Of course it doesn't want to work with me when I'm live. There we go. That's better. Okay. That's about what we wanted. Alright. So this way you guys can actually see all of my research that I did prior to the stream. Yay, I did work. I tried to make it really fun. Hey Simone, welcome. I am over on Twitch. Same handle as my name here on TikTok. Please join me over there. We're about to go through all of the vocabulary from the first two books in the Silmarillion. Alright, so Silmarillion non-English vocabulary. And there's a lot of it. I apologize in advance, but this is where you learn all of the things. Alright, so the two books that we read today are the Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta. And so first off, we're going to cover the titles of those books. What does Ainulindalë mean? Ainulindalë is Quenya. It is from the Quenya language. Whenever you see that I have parentheses with a Q in them, the Q stands for Quenya. I can even write it. I'll write it for you. So Q stands for Quenya. The early form of Quenya was called Kenya, with just a Q-E-N-Y-A, with no U. So the Ainulindalë is from Quenya. It is from Ainur, which are the heavenly ones, and it just means holy ones or heavenly ones. And linda is the verb to sing. When you add the abstract suffix lay to the end of it, it becomes music or singing. So it's the music of the Ainur, or the singing of the Ainur. That's what Ainulindalë actually means. So its subtitle, The Music of the Ainur, is actually a translation. Same with the Valaquenta. Valaquenta is also Quenya. I didn't put it there. Let's fix that. There we go. The Valaquenta is the account of the Valar from Vala, which is power or powers, and Quinta, which is a story, an account, or a history. So it's the account of the Valar. So moving on. So those are the two titles, at least, of the book. So now you know what they actually mean. They're both Quenya, and they mean the music of the Ainur and the account of the Valar. So next up we have the heavenly beings. I separated the heavenly beings from the earthly beings. I didn't want to designate them as being mortal and immortal because the elves are technically immortal. So these are the heavenly beings. We start with Eru. Literally means the one. That one guy. Or he that is alone. Because is the word for one or alone. Thank you. Okay, so Eru has another name, which is Iluvatar. So we see both names being used. These are interchangeable in the books. So whenever we come across a reference to the one god, the highest up in this hierarchy, half the time he's called Eru and half the time he's called Iluvatar. Iluvatar is what the elves tended to call him when they actually called him by name, but it was pretty rare for them to call him by name. Typically that only happened during rituals or during oaths. So things like marriages, stuff like that. So they only invoked his actual name during important moments. So Iluvatar means all father, from Iluve, which means all or the whole, and Atar, which is Quenya for father. And again, I didn't put that these are Quenya. They are. There we go. Just so you guys know. So after Iluvatar stepped down from Iluvatar, the creations that he made from his thought are called the Ainur. Singular is just Ainu. You take the R off. Aina is Quenya for holiness. So the Ainur are the holy ones. Of the Ainur, think of the Ainur as being all of the angels, right? The Valar are the powers. Vala means power in Quenya. And they are what could be called demiurges. They are the ones who were given the ability to fashion the physical world. So this is a group of the Ainur that actually went down into the world and created it. So the Valar are, the group of 14. 15 if you include Melkor, but Melkor is usually kicked out because he's the bad guy. So there are 14 Valar. And then going further down the hierarchy, from the group of 14 Valar, there are the Aratar, which are the high ones. And again, this is all Quenya, but these are the top 8 of the Valar, the most powerful of them. So Aratar comes from Arata, which means high or lofty or noble. So these are the high ones. So you've got the Ainur. From them you have the group called the Valar. And inside the group of the Valar you have the Aratar, which are the high ones. And I did name them there for you, so you can see all of the names. It's Manwë, Varda, Ulmo, Yavanna, Owle, Namo, Nienna, and Oromay. And just as a refresher, Manwë is the one of the skies, Varda, stars, Ulmo, ocean, Yavanna, growing things, or fruits. Owle is sort of the lord of the earth. He's the craftsman. Namo is the lord of the dead. Nienna is the one who grieves. And Oromay is like the hunter. So those are considered the top 8 of the Valar. They are called the Aratar. Another small subgroup of the Valar is the Feyen Turi. So these guys. And Feyen Turi is, again, from Quenya. Feya means spirit, and Tur means master or lord, so these are the masters of the spirits. Typically, this refers just to Namo and Irmo. Namo being the lord of the dead and of time, and Irmo being the lord of dreams and visions. Because they have a deeper understanding of the spirits of people. They see to the hearts of people, and understand them to a deeper degree than the other Valar. And here's my cat again. Alana, come here. What are you doing? Come here, kitten bit. Do you want a moment? You can have a moment. I love you. I was gone for a week to take care of my sister, so my kitties are a bit clingy. You're a good girl, Alana. Yeah. Come on. Yoink. Okay. So the Feyen Turi see to the spirits of people. Thus they are the masters or lords of spirits. So typically it's just Namo and Irmo that are referred to as the Feyen Turi, but sometimes Nienna is counted as one of the Feyen Turi, because she's in charge of grief and deeper understanding, and she's the one who turns pain into wisdom and teaches that transition. So in her own way, she is also one of the Feyen Turi. I like to count her amongst them. But it depends on what text you're looking at, whether or not she's counted amongst them. All right, next up, the Mayar. Maya is actually Quenya for beautiful. It's limited in a way, but it's a form of the word beautiful. So this is a subgroup of the Ainur. You had the Valar, from then you had the Aratar, and then another offshoot of the Ainur is the Mayar. They are a subgroup, and they are the helpers of the Valar. They do not have quite as much power, though sometimes, depending on who they are revered just as highly as the Valar. That is the case for Uinen, for Owle. Both of those were Mayar of Ulmo, god of the seas. Other Mayar that we know of, Irmo, who becomes Saruman, Olorin, who becomes Gandalf, and Melian, whom we will cover when we read the Silmarillion. She goes into Arda and marries one of the elves. So, those are the major heavenly beings and all of their subgroups. So, hopefully that helps you guys get a better idea of how this hierarchy works. So we've got the Ainur, and from that it branches into the Valar and the Mayar. And then from the Valar you have that smaller subgroup of 8, which are the Aratar. And there's also that small group called the Feyen Turi, and they're the ones who read the spirits of people. So that's dreams, and death, and grieving into wisdom. So those are the Feyen Turi. So hopefully that breaks it down a little bit, and you guys understand a bit of the hierarchy of the heavenly beings, and then we can move on. This is only partial for the earthly beings. There will be many more terms that we will cover once we actually get into the Silmarillion, because there are a ton of different subgroups of the elves. It gets really complicated. I actually did a video over on TikTok about that specifically, because it gets really confusing when you have all of these different terms tossed about. But again, the point of this is to show you guys what the words actually mean in their given languages. So for earthly beings, we have the Eldar, or the Eldaliae. Both of those terms were used in the Valaquenta. And they are literally people of the stars. Elda means of the stars. If you break that down even further, El is star. So any names that you come across in Tolkien's world, like Elrond, Elladan, Elrohir, Elros, all of them have El in them. And El means star. It means stars. So any of those names have that sort of element to them, whether they are in Quenya or in Sindarin. Because Ellen, instead of Elda, Ellen means stars. Well, it means star, singular, and then Elin, with an I, is stars, plural, in Sindarin. So there is a lot of crossover between Quenya and Sindarin. They're supposed to have a common linguistic base, in that originally all of the elves spoke a single language, but as they became separated into different groups, their languages evolved separately. So that's how you get Quenya, which was spoken over in Valinor by primarily the Noldor. but also the Vanyar, the Teleri, other subgroups of the elves that went over to Valinor spoke Quenya. But separately, the elves that stayed behind in Middle-earth and didn't go to Valinor, their language developed separately into Sindarin. So Sindarin, or Evelyn as they call it, is their own Elvish language. To them, it's just known as Elvish. It's just Elvish to them. There wasn't a distinction. But when the Noldor come back from Valinor into Beleriand and they find the Sindar, suddenly they realize we don't speak the same language anymore. We spent too much time apart and now we don't understand each other. So then the elves take it upon themselves to learn the other language. Specifically, the Noldor learn Sindarin very quickly. So that's why you see a lot of Quenya, and sometimes you'll see a little bit of Sindarin in names. It all depends on who's talking. So a lot of times, early on in these books, with the Silmarillion, and especially during the Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta, we're talking Quenya, because this is all an account based on what the elves were told when they were in Valinor with the gods, when they lived with them. So that is sort of the background of these stories. With that in mind, you know that Quenya is going to be most of the names in these early books, whereas Sindarin becomes the most widely used language later on. It's used by the Sindar, but then when the Noldor come back, they learn Sindarin and they use it in everyday language. So at that point, you see a shift in all of the names, and most of the names of places and people become based in Sindarin. This is why you end up with a character that has 4 different names. It's because there are 2 different languages at work. Do I have a favorite language? Sindarin? I really like the sound of Sindarin. There's a certain... I don't know, there's a certain mood to it that I think a lot of the vowel sounds are close to Welsh. And I've always enjoyed listening to people speak Celtic or Welsh. I love the Welsh the Welsh accent is so enjoyable for me. Like if you ever watched the show Torchwood, Gwyn Cooper, she's Welsh. But I love, there's a certain lilt to the Welsh accent that I really enjoy. So I try to bring that when I speak Sindarin. I try and bring some of that vibe. I think that Quenya more closely resembles Finnish than Welsh. You can see Tolkien liked Finnish as a language, and he used parts of it to inspire. But he also took a lot of cues from Scandinavian mythology as well. You see a lot of that reflected in his works. So, he liked Scandinavia. Quenya is originally the Noldorian language, yes. Mm-hmm. That is as close as you're going to get to it, yeah. Though the Vanyar and the Teleri also spoke it, but the Telerian, it's like having a different slang. The Sea Elves, or the Teleri, they developed their own slang they spoke by the ocean. And it's banned because of the kinslaying, correct. Again, we'll cover that once we actually get into the Silmarillion. That will become very clear. Very, very clear. Spoiler alert. Alright, so, the Eldar are the people of the stars. The Noldor, which is a subsect of the Eldar. There are the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. The Noldor are the people of knowledge. It's a primitive root in Quenya, but the primitive root is Ngol, or Ngol. Ngol is knowledge, wisdom, or lore. So these are the people of knowledge, wisdom, or lore. They are the well-taught ones. Alright, moving on to locations. So these are all the places, and again, we start with like the big, wide, expansive one, and then we slowly narrow it down. So Ea is the universe. Ea is literally just the Quenya verb to be. It can then be conjugated, but Ea itself is just to be. So it is all that is. It is. It just is. That's all that is. So that is huge. That includes the void. It includes everything. Arda is from Imbar or Ambar, which means habitation. Another supposed primitive Quenya root is Garda, which means a bounded place or region. So it's actually a contained area within Ea. And that is Arda, which I just generally say realm. That's the world. We've got the universe, and then we've got the world inside the universe. Make sense? So Arda is the world. Aman, or Aman. I say Aman. It was in one of the notes in the letters, I think, that Aman is the only word where the emphasis goes on the second syllable. It's a very rare exception. Typically, like in Arda, it's Arda, not Arda. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa. So it's Arda, but it's Aman. Man is the root, and therefore it is the part of the word that gets the emphasis. But Aman itself means blessed or free from evil. Blessed. Hashtag blessed. So it's the blessed land, or it's also often called the undying lands in the books. Next up, we've got Valinor. Valinor is inside Aman. So we've got Arda, which is the world. We've got Aman, which is a section of the world. It's the blessed land. It's basically, think of it as a continent. The continent of Aman. And then Valinor is a realm inside that continent. And that's the land of the Valar. The Quenya is Valinore, but that's the archaic form, and it eventually became Valinor. So again, Quenya in origin, it literally means land of the Valar. You see Val or Vala used a lot, and that's because Valar is power. We already hit on that. And then within Valinor, we have Taniquetil. You can sometimes see it with an accent over this I here, and sometimes there isn't an accent over it. Either way, it should be pronounced Taniquetil. Taniquetil. With ni being the emphasis. But you will often hear me say Taniquetil, where I put ta and que as the emphasis of the word. So yeah, I mess up the pronunciation on this all the time. And that's why I'm not huge on, unless people want me to correct them, I try not to be that person. Because I mess things up all the time. So Taniquetil is high snow or white peak. It's like the Snow White Peak. And it is the tallest peak in Arda, and that is where Manwë and Varda live. Why is Middle-earth called Middle-earth? Another name that Middle-earth is given is Endor, and that's what Endor translates to as Middle-earth. Middle land. The reason it is called Middle-earth is it is in the center of a flat disk world, initially. When Arda is created, it's three-dimensional, but it exists on a plane. It's meant to be a disk. Disk world. It's meant to be a flat Earth. Forget physics, okay? Like, it works because magic. But it is meant to be a flat world. And then after the Second Age, that world becomes round. And so the physics completely change. But initially, it is a flat disk. And Arda, Endor, the Middle Earth, is in the center. About generally in the center. It is surrounded by ocean on either side. So it is the middle part of Arda. Does that make sense? It's like a disk in the middle. And on the middle of that disk is where the elves and men live. On their little continents in their own space. But it's all in the center. It's all in the center of it. So that is why they use the term Endor, because it's the Middle Earth. that is how we get Middle-earth. So again, that's just us naming the thing what it actually is, but just in, I believe Endor is Sindarin. So Taniquetil is the tallest peak, Oyolose is another name for it, which means everlasting snow. And again, these are all Quenya in origin. Laurelin, which is different from Laurelin. Laurelin is one of the two trees of Valinor. We'll get into that later once we read the Silm, the Quinta Silm. But Laurelin is Lore, or dream, plus Lin, which is pool. So it's the dream pool. Laurelin is the dream pool. It is the tree-shadowed lake in Irmo's or Lorien's gardens. So in that place of dreams and rest, there is a lake called Laurelin, or the dream pool. There's a island in the middle of that lake where Este sleeps. Yeah, no worries. Happy to help. Next up, we've got Valimar. Valimar, again, we have Val, or Vala. So Val meaning power, or the powers, the Valar. And then Mar meaning dwelling or abode. So this is where the Valar live. So it's another shoop. Other than, obviously, we just talked about these other couple of places where they specifically live. But Valimar is where all of the Valar congregate. Whenever they come together, it is in Valimar. And sometimes that I is omitted and it's called Valmar. This you can think of as more of a city. It's a realm. It's a realm inside Valinor. Valinor being larger, with several different realms inside it. So, we've got Valinor, which is the land of the Valar, and then we have Valimar, which is the dwelling of the Valar. Okay? See how it slowly trickles down? On to characters. Now, this is hopefully going to be the most helpful to everyone. So anyone who's watching, it's really, really easy to get confused which character is which. Hopefully, by learning some of where these names came from, it'll help you remember who's who. So Manwe, he's the head honcho, the one who's in charge of air and breath and wind and birds. The sky god, basically. But his name means blessed one, or blessed one. Man is blessed, we is a masculine suffix on the name. He is also called Sulimo. That's something that they mentioned in the Valaquenta. Sulimo translates literally to breather. Breather of air. So Sulimo is actually a much more descriptive name. So if you see that, Sulimo means breather. So Manwe is the god of breath, the god of air. Next up is Ulmo. Ulmo is the pourer, from Ulia, which means to pour, and Mo is an agentive suffix. It makes pour into pourer. He who pours. So Ulmo is the pourer. And from that, think of like Aquarius, same concept. It's the person pouring the water. So he is the god of the ocean, the god of the seas, water, all water. When he and Manwe get together, they make clouds, right? And rain. Next up is Owle. Owle is the craftsman god, so his name actually means invention. In Sindarin, he's called Gaul instead of Owle. So you can see the similarity there with the AU diphthong. So Owle is also called Gaul, and in Khuzdul, which is the Dwarvish language, he is called Mahal, which means the maker. Which takes on special significance once we read the Silm. You will see that Owle created the dwarves. So he is literally the maker of the dwarves. He is their own personal god. Even though he's not the one god, he's their god, basically, because he did create them out of dirt. So Owle is known for making things. So his name is invention. Owle. Next up is Oromay. Emphasis should be on that opening O. It should be Oromay, not Oromay. Sometimes a mistake I make, but it's Oromay. Oromay means horn blowing. It's from Oromays, which is a Valarin, the language that the Valar speak. There's not a lot given in the etymologies about Valarin specifically, but it's the sound of horns. It's typically thought that Oromay is close to the sound of a horn blowing. It's almost like an onomatopoeia, and we'll get to that later as well. Nickname of his is Aldoron. Alda means tree. Ron would mean lord or person of trees. So Aldoron means person of trees. Tauron, same thing. Taur means forest. Trees, forest, lord. But it's in Sindarin. So we have Quenya and Sindarin. These two names mean the same thing. They mean lord of forests. So he's the lord of forests, and he has this horn. So he's called the horn blower, or Oromay. Next up is Namo, also called Mandos. Namo is his actual name. His given name is Namo. Nam being from the word judge, or ordainer. So he's the doomsman of the Valar. He's the one who deals with death, and in his own way, rebirth. So Namo is from Nam, which is judge. If he is called Mandos translates to castle of custody. The place where people are. Or the place where people are kept. And again, this is from Quenya, so that's what Mandos means. Mandos is a location, rather than it being a person's name, but he's usually called Mandos. It's called Mandos Halls. Next up is Irmo. This is Namo's brother. These two are the Feyen Turi. So again, trying to get you used to these terms, Feyen Turi, which was that subsect of the Valar. The ones who know spirits, right? Masters of spirits. That's Namo and Irmo. But they're both known by their realm names, which gets confusing. So Irmo is usually known as Lorien. Lorien means land of dreams. Lothlorien is the realm of Galadriel later on. Galadriel, when she's young, spends a lot of time in Lorien, in Valinor. So that's where she gets the name Lothlorien from. It's sort of, calling back to her original dwelling place in Aman when she was born. But Irmo means desirer, so he's the master of desire. And this is a general desire, not necessarily a sensual desire. It's dreams and desires. So all dreams. Think of it that way. Yeah, fantasy. What does Loth mean in Lothlorien? I think it means flower? Let me look it up. I want to be extra sure. I want to make sure I get this right for you. I think it means that. Where am I here? Okay. I'll open up a new tab and take a look. I just want to make sure I get you guys the actual answer. So, etymology. Let's look. Lorien of the Blossom. I was right. Loth means, it's like flower. So you have Loth plus Lorien. Yes. I love it when I'm right. I love it when I remember things. It goes by a bunch of other names too, but Lothlorien is... It's typically referred to as the Golden Wood, but that's not the actual translation. You could translate Lothlorien to mean dream flower. Because Lorien is the land of dreams, right? And Loth is flower, so it's like the flower dreamland. But Galadriel did this as a nod to the actual original Lorien. And even though Lothlorien is often condensed to just Lorien, it's not the original Lorien. So, fun times, learning things. I'll just put that as a note. Lothlorien is loth, or flower, plus Lorien. Oops. There we go. So just as a note, Lothlorien is not the same place, but it's taken from the same words. Quenya in origin, rather than Sindarin, which makes sense because Galadriel was born, that's her native tongue, is Quenya. Alright, next up we've got Tulkas. Tulkas, it's basically from a couple different... Tulkas itself in Quenya means steady or firm. So it's actually just a translation. It's a straight up translation. Tulkas is the steady or firm one. This is the guy who likes to fight. This is the guy who's spoiling for a fight. He likes to arm wrestle. He's golden haired. He has ruddy complexion. Tulkas in my head is your stereotypical redneck. Like, this is the guy with the ruddy complexion, the sun-bleached hair, right? He's got the pale hair, like he's been out in the sun, working hard, got that ruddy complexion going on, and he's just spoiling for a good fight. He loves it. Like, he will laugh. He laughs in the face of danger, basically. That's what he does. So, Tulkas, in my head, is very much like that just really fun-loving, laugh-in-your-face, let's take it on, let's do the thing, let's go! He's that kind of guy. He is that redneck guy, which I love. I love it. And his wife is Nessa. We'll get to her. Nessa is the one who dances on tables and takes her shirt off. Like, that's how Nessa is. I have a very particular image in my head. But that's who Tulkas is, and his other name is Astaldo, which translates to valiant. This Tulakastas is golden-haired, but it's in Valarin. So that's, again, the language that the Valar spoke. Not a lot of stuff there for us to draw from when we're looking at it. So we just have to be like, oh, okay, that's what it means. I don't know if Tuluk is gold, or maybe Hasta is gold. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know Valarin. Sorry, guys. But Astaldo means valiant, so you've got this steady, firm guy who's really valiant. He loves fighting. Good for him. Moving on to the ladies. It's one criticism I have, the one major criticism I have in this so far, is that Tolkien gendered everything. Really strongly gendered things. When you didn't need to. These are powers, right? The Valar are literally the powers. And they can take any form they want. But they, according to him, identified right off the bat as being either male or female. And I find that silly. I find that just frankly silly. So in my own interpretation of Tolkien, I like to see them fudge that a bit. If Varda can appear as starlight to the elves, then she could take a male form if she wanted to. They're the powers. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to take the form that they're expected to take. Which is why I thought it would be interesting if Sauron took a female form. But then you'd be making the one female character into the bad guy, and that's not great. Representation is important, and I'd rather that not be the case. But I think it's within the power of any of the Ainur to change their form at will. Think of like Zeus, like Greek mythology. They're changing their form all the time. They tend to be gendered, but they can change their form however they want. That's basically the same vibe we've got with the Valar. Alright, so Varda, onto the ladies. Varda means sublime or exalted in Valarin. So there's that. In early Quenya, which is the predecessor to Quenya, Quenya evolved into Quenya, you have Vard, which means to rule or govern, and you have Varni, which means queen. So it could be a combination of any of those. She is a ruler. She is the sublime exalted one. Her other nicknames are Elentari, which means Star Queen. Again, we have the El, or Ellen. All the things that have El or Ellen in them have to do with stars. You have the Eldar. They are the people of the stars. Elentari. Tari being queen in Quenya. And in Sindarin, she's called Elbereth. Now, Bereth means wife. It's like queen/wife, but it's with a very strong connotation that is the queen to some king. There's the implication there that there is a king involved. So not just solo queen, like Yas queen. But Bereth, like when you are saying my spouse in Sindarin is Berethen. So Bereth means spouse, and in this case, queen. So star queen, or star wife, star spouse. And I'm like, come on, Tolkien, make her a strong, independent woman. She doesn't need Manwë to be amazing. Anyway, moving on. After Varda, we have Yavanna. Yavanna is the giver of fruits. She's the Earth Queen, basically. And that's what her nickname means. Kementari means Queen of the Earth. Yave means fruit. Anna means gift. Yavanna, fruit giver, right? Giver of fruits. So that's all in Quenya. Next up is Nienna. From the word Nie, which is tear, you've got the Lady of Tears, Nienna. I count her amongst the Feyen Turi. Okay, after Nienna, who, actually, by the way, Nienna is the sister of Irmo and Namo, the Feyen Turi, which is why I count her amongst them. She's said to be the sister in thought. There is no sister by blood in the Valar, in the Ainur. But as close as you can get when you're talking about gods and goddesses, basically. Este means rest. She is exactly what she sounds like. She is the rest and repose goddess. Which is why she sleeps on that island in the middle of Lorelin, remember? Dream pool? That's where she sleeps. But she is all about the rest. Rest and relaxation queen. Vaire is the weaver, and if you remember, she weaves tapestries based on the history of Middle-earth. That is all she does. And weave is like, not necessarily like a woven blanket or tapestry. You can weave out of any substance. In her case, she's weaving things from memory. And from sort of the... You can think of it more spiritually than like an actual physical weaving. So I want you guys to expand your thought when it comes to Vaire, because it's not just like she's making tapestries all day and that's all she does. She weaves from something greater than cloth, okay? But her name literally means weaver. Tolkien didn't really work hard when it came to the female names. Like, I mean, you look at these and it's just kind of sad. Nienna, tears. Este, rest. Vaire, weaver. Vanna, beautiful. I can be critical here. Come on, Tolkien. Give us a little more to work with. Vanna means beautiful. That's literally it. She's also called the Ever Young, but Vanna comes from the root ban. B changes to V when things are lenited. So, Ban or Bine. It would be Bine in Sindarin. So, again, some crossover between Quenya and Sindarin, but Vanna means beautiful. And that's all you get. Nessa means young. She's also called Indis, which means bride. So again, Tolkien not working very hard with the women here. Moving on to the other characters, the Mayar. We had 4 main Mayar that were explicitly talked about in the Valaquenta. Ilmare is Starlight, and she is the handmaid of Varda. Her name literally means starlight in Quenya. Eonwe, we don't know what his name means. I'm not sure what his name means. The feel that I get, and this is pure speculation and just gut feeling from me. Eonwe, even though it comes from an unknown origin in Valerian, he makes me think of the dawn. He is like, look to the dawn on the 5th day, right? Look to the east. We have that in Lord of the Rings, that theme of when the dawn comes, when the light comes, you have this force of arms that can help turn the tide of a battle. Eonwe is said to be the best fighter ever in the entirety of Middle-earth. Like, this guy could fight Tulkas if he wanted to, and probably did, for fun. Tulkas would be the type, like I said, Tulkas being the redneck, spoiling for a fight guy who just laughs at danger. Tulkas would totally challenge Eonwe to a fight, like, all the time, just for fun, for shits and giggles. It's totally what he would do. So, Eonwe, in my head, gives that feel. The way on the end of his name is a masculine name suffix, but Aeon, I'm not sure what it means. In my head, it just gives me that feeling of dawn. And that's just me. I have no idea. I have no idea what it actually means. But he is the herald of Manwë, and he's the banner bearer. He fights. And he kicks some serious butt. Next up is Owle. Owle means terror in Quenya. This is the guy who makes storms, okay? He is one of the Maya from Ulmo. Ulmo being the god of the seas, again. So he's the Maya of seashores, islands, and ocean storms. So he's the guy who likes to make storms. He thinks it's fun. And that's sort of the terror that comes from storms, right? From the violence of storms. That sort of propensity toward violence and toward something that's really tempestuous like that, that's what makes him an easy target for Melkor. Melkor's like, ooh, I want you on my side, because you've already got some of that violence going on, and I love it. Hey, Hannah, welcome! Thank you so much for the sub! You're such a sweetheart, thank you. So Owle is all about the terror. He's all about, like, being tempestuous, going into a rage. It's fun, it's enjoyable for him. He makes sea storms. He's like the typhoon lord, okay? Hurricane, no problem. He's totally down for it, for a little bit of destruction, right? But that's why Melkor tries to win him over to his side. And for a while, he does. That's the thing. Owle turns to the dark side for a period of time. And it's only his wife, Uinen, who sort of reels him back in, takes him before Ulmo, and is like, you need to stop. You're not helping. So, on to his wife, Uinen. She's, you know, Sailor Moon in my head. She is a sailor senshi. Sailors call out to her in their times of need when they're on the ocean. When Owle is making storms, Uinen is the one who calms him down a little bit. She calms him down and makes the sea more accommodating for fishermen and mariners. So she loves all the sea creatures. There was a description that her hair was in all the waters of the world, which is an odd thing to think about. There's hair in my water. But her name is another one that doesn't have a known origin. There is Nen in it, Nen, and that means water. So it could be associated with that, but there's no proof of it. We don't know. Tolkien never said what her name actually means. So, seaweed? Water? Something? We're not sure. But she answers to Ulmo as well, and she keeps Owle in check. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's basically what she tells him. So, Uinen is the reason that Owle comes back to the bright side. And then he being probably given a terrible tongue lashing from Ulmo, he falls back in line and he never strays again. So, Owle almost joined Melkor. He did join Melkor. They do mention that in what we read today. For a time, he joined Melkor, and he was making all sorts of storms. And because he likes that, he was having fun, and Melkor is always going to encourage that, right? Yeah, be selfish. Make your thing. Do your stuff. No one should be able to stop you. And he's like, yeah, I just want to have fun. I want to make storms. I want to break stuff. And Uinen's like, no. You've been listening to the wrong people. These friends are bad for you. So Uinen pulls him in. She calms the sea. So she's like the yin to his yang, if that's the way you wanna think it. Owle is the yang. Uinen is the yin. Next up is Melian, whom I will almost always mispronounce as Melian. I like to put the emphasis on the li, on the e. But her name means dear gift. And this is actually a Sindarin name. This is, again, where we have a separation, because Melian lives in Middle-earth. She, after Middle-earth is formed and the elves are there, she goes down there and doesn't leave. She never comes back. Until, the war is over. and her husband is dead, and her children are dead. She eventually goes back, I am sure, but Melian, her name is in Sindarin because she was amongst the Sindar. Her actual Quenya name means love gift. It's Meliana, which is close. Again, Anna means gift. And Mel, or Meli, is love. And Mel here is dear, beloved, kind of thing. So the name means about the same thing when you translate it. She's the former servant of Este, who was our goddess of rest, and Vana, who was the beautiful one, the ever-young. So she served both of them, and she spent most of her time in Lorien. Sort of the land of dreams. And then the last one that was mentioned was Olorin. Olorin is he of dreams and visions. From the Quenya word olos or olor, which means dream or vision, or something from the mind. It's a conjuring of the mind. Also a servant in Lorien, but he spent a lot of his time with Nienna. Nienna being the goddess of grief, and turning grief and loss into wisdom. So from her, he learned a lot of, pity and patience and how to give good counsel. And so when we see him as Gandalf, as one of the Istari later on, one of the wizards, Gandalf is a mannish term that translates to, wand or staff elf. The elf with a staff. Because men are stupid and don't know the difference between the gods and the elves. He was elf-like enough to them for them to name him Gandalf. His Sindarin name is Mithrandir, which means Grey Wanderer. Mith is grey, and Randir is wanderer. So Mithrandir. Is Melian in the Second Age? Not really. Melian is primarily in the First Age. She's there in Beleriand. She marries Thingol, or Elu, or Elwë, whatever name you want to know him by. She marries the Sindarin king, the Sindar king. Eventually, spoiler alert, the Sindar king gets killed. Everyone does. Almost everyone dies, okay? This is a war story. But when Thingol inevitably dies. And there's a whole thing about Beren and Luthien. Luthien is her daughter. Luthien eventually dies as well. There's nothing really left for her in Middle-earth, and so most likely, when the War of Wrath happens at the end of the First Age, she goes over the sea and ends up in Valinor. There's nothing keeping her there, and if she ever wants to see Thingol again, if she wants to see her husband again, he will be reborn in Valinor. So that would be a good reason for her to head over to Mandos again. So those are all of the Mayar that we covered. So just to recap, Ilmare means starlight. She's the handmaiden of Varda, the queen of the stars. So starlight makes sense. Eonwe, we don't know what his name means, but he is the banner bearer of Manwe. Alse means terror. He makes storms. His name translated into Valarian actually means foaming. So that kind of gives a sea churning. So again, he's the guy who likes to make storms. Uinen is his wife. She reels him back in. And the mariners love her because she calms the oceans for them. Melian, the Maya. We see her a lot in the Silmarillion, so we'll get into her later. And Oloran, we know not so much in the Silmarillion. He doesn't really show up that much. But later in the Third Age, he is Gandalf, so he's a main character in The Lord of the Rings. And also in The Hobbit. On to our final grouping of character names. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people, and they have a lot of different names, so just trying to give you guys all the background. Melkor is he who arises in might. And this is from Eldarin, which is basically Elvish. From the Eldar. So mostly Quenya. This is basically the same thing as Quenya. Melek means great or mighty or powerful. Ore is to rise. So, he who rises in power. He's that powerful guy. Again, very descriptive. I mean, why work hard? Hey, Lady Brittany, welcome. We're going over vocabulary in the beginning of the Silmarillion. So this is going to seem pretty dry for you because you missed all the reading part. But that is what Melkor means. It means he who arises in might or in power. His Sindarin name that he's given later on by the elves is Morgoth. Mor meaning dark or black. Sorry. Mor means dark or black. Goth means foe, or, tyrant or bad guy. So black foe, dark tyrant. Same guy. So mostly he is known as Morgoth. The vast majority of the time in the Silmarillion, we will be calling Melkor Morgoth. But Melkor is his original name. But because the elves never call him that, you can think of it this way. His siblings, the other Ainur, Manwe, Varda, Namo, they would call him Melkor. Because that's his given name, and they knew him before he was in Middle-earth. But once the elves come around, they nickname him Morgoth, because to them, he's just the bad guy. There's no depth to character from the perspective of the elves. They're just like, this guy's pure evil. I don't think he is, and Tolkien doesn't write him to be pure evil. But the perception of the elves colors the narrative. So the elves call him Black Foe. And that's the name that you will see most often throughout the Silmarillion. I am not writing a book. This is all from Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. This is vocabulary from the beginning of the Silmarillion, which takes place roughly 8,000? Maybe 7,000 years before The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So it's a long time before. But this is what happens in the first stage of Middle-earth, whereas Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit happen in the third age of Middle-earth. So we're just going through some of the vocabulary, character names, what they actually mean, so that hopefully it won't be as confusing when we read through it. So the other one who is named is Sauron. We've all heard of Sauron. He's the main bad guy in Lord of the Rings, right? His original name is Myron. And Myron means admirable or impressive. Actually, in Sindarin, Myron is impressive. So admirable, impressive, like, excellent. Myron went by Myron, or Tar Myron, which means king. Tar is king. So we had King Excellent, which is really self-congratulatory. He's really proud of himself. Good job. But he is one of the most talented and one of the most powerful Mayar. Like, really pretty much on par with any of the Valar, which is why he gives them so much trouble. The moment Myron is seduced to the dark side, like, the Valar are quaking in their boots. They feel pretty bad about it. Because Myron is one of the best Mayar in existence. So his name means admirable in Quenya. He calls himself Tar Myron, which is King Excellent! But he calls himself that until Numenor falls. So we haven't really talked much about Numenor. That's going to come after we finish the Silmarillion, when we hit the Akalabath, which is the book after the Silm. It's a shorter book. Much like the Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta, which we read today. The Akalabath comes after the Silmarillion, and that's everything that happens in the Second Age, sort of condensed. But that is what Myron calls himself, because of the way the Númenórean kings were named. Most of them start with Tar, and then a hyphen, and then something, like Tar Afarazon, Tar Farazon. They all have Tar at the beginning of their name. So because of that, while Myron called himself this, he didn't use that name when he was amongst the Númenóreans. Because that would have been like calling himself their king, and they would have taken that really badly. So he might have called himself that, but he didn't go by that by other people. That was just his name for himself. So that's like, I gave myself this name because I think I'm awesome. Which is a whole vibe. But Sauron, the actual name Sauron, is Quenya, and it means the abhorred. So, this is the name that he is given by the elves early on. This is the name he's given by the Noldor, who speak Quenya. From the word Sauron, which means foul, putrid, or vile. So he's that vile guy. He's that guy. And then in Sindarin, he's known as Gorthaur, or Gorthaur the Cruel. Gor meaning horror or dread, and Thaur meaning abominable or abhorrent. So Saura and Thaur, you can see some similarity there. So the abhorred in Quenya and the terrible dread in Sindarin. Later on, Sauron takes another name. He calls himself Anatar. This is in the Second Age when he takes a fair form and goes amongst the elves and basically seduces them and, is king of treachery. But when he's amongst the elves, he gives himself this new name and calls himself Anatar, which means Lord of Gifts. Anna, which we've seen from Yavanna, right? Yavanna is the one who gifts fruit, right? From Yahweh, which is fruit, and Anna, which is gift. So Anna here is gift and Tar is Lord. Much like we see Tar Myron, right? King, Lord, ruler guy. So this is ruler guy of gifts, king of gifts. He's the Lord of gifts. Like, he's going to give you all the gifts. And that's exactly the feel he wants to give the elves. I'm here to help you. I'm here to give you all the great things in life. Your life is going to be so much better when you welcome me in. But he's the bad guy. I'm the bad guy, duh. So he uses this name, Anatar, in the Second Age when he's seducing elves and men. To, let him close. A couple other names that he's given during that same period of time when he's known as Anatar. He's also known as Artano, which means high smith, and Ainulindalë, which means devoted to Owle or friend of Owle. Which is totally a ruse. because originally Myron was one of Owle's Mayar. He's one of Owle's guys. But then Melkor wins him over. Melkor seduces Myron to the dark side, and the moment that happens, he's no longer devoted to Owle. So this is sort of tongue-in-cheek. He makes himself out to be a messenger from Owle. That's part of this persona that he takes on as Anatar. But in reality, he's betrayed Owle. He's one of the bad guys now. He's not Owle's Maya anymore. On to the other bad guys. So we've got Melkor / Morgoth. We've got Myron / Sauron, same guy. And then we have the Valaraukar, which literally translates to Vala, power. We've already learned this from the Valar, right? And Rauko is monster. So powerful monsters. They're bad guys. Again, Tolkien being kind of lazy, he just takes his made-up language and he describes the thing that he's naming. So powerful monsters. These are the Balrogs. Balrog just happens to be in a different language. That's Sindarin. Hi, Alana, you're back. Please don't lay on my keyboard, kitten. Please don't lay on my keyboard. So, the Balrogs that we see in Lord of the Rings, the big flame monster that pulls Gandalf down into Khazad-dûm in Moria when he falls. That big flame monster is a Balrog, aka one of the Valaraukar, the powerful monsters. And they are Mayar. They're not as powerful as Sauron, but they're in that same class of beings. And Balrog has its root in Owle, which is a primitive Elvish. It's like primitive Sindarin, but that means torment and cruelty. So they're the powerful, cruel monsters. All right, last section. I promise we're almost there. We are almost there, guys. I have 2 cats. I have 2 cats. I wish I had all the cats. I do wish I had all the cats. I had a dozen cats in Florida, and I miss them so much. But when I moved to Arizona, because I am now living with my father, he only allowed me to bring 2. He let me bring 2 cats. So I have Gray, who is asleep right next to me, because he's a good boy, and then Alana, who keeps coming up here and bugging me. So Gray and Alana are my kitties. Alana is a dilute tortie, so she's a tortie kitty. Gray is just all gray, like his name says. All right, on to objects, and this is the last section of vocabulary, and then we'll do a quick review, and hopefully we'll be good to go. How many did I want to bring with me? I wanted to bring 3. I knew my dad wouldn't let me bring a lot of them, but I begged him, literally begged him, for me to be able to bring a 3rd one with me. Because it's, Gray is like the mama kitty, even though I use male pronouns for him. He's my genderqueer cat, and I'd like you to respect his life choices. But Gray had 3 kittens. Phobos, Deimos, and Alana. Alana is the kitten that's here. She was the youngest kitten in the house. But Phobos and Deimos are still in Florida. Phobos was always closer to other cats. She didn't really bond with the rest of the family, but Deimos was very close to Gray and Alana. And I wanted so badly to bring him. And he's such a scaredy cat. I was working on him for years trying to get him to open up and break out of that shell. And I was just starting to get there when I moved. So every time I call my roommates back in Florida and they put me on speakerphone, every time I say his name, he perks up and looks around and he gets all lovey-dovey with my roommates. I miss him. Deimos is my sweet boy. So I wanted to bring 3, but I could only bring 2. So I have Gray and Alana, and Deimos is still down in Florida. But I check in on him very frequently because I love my cats. I love all the kitties I left behind. But this was like the little family unit that I thought I could get away with. Alright, so these are objects that were mentioned in the Valaquenta. There are only 3 of them, so it's nothing crazy. The Ulamuri is Ulmo's horns, and they're made out of great seashells. So you can think of them as conchs. They're like conch shells, which native indigenous populations use as horns all the time. So think of it as a giant conch shell that he blows. And so there you go. The etymology of the name is actually really obscure. We don't know what exactly it means, but we're talking about Ulmo, and we have Ulum. So there's probably a connection there. Nahar is Oromay's horse, his horse that he rides around Middle-earth. And it's thought that Nahar is an onomatopoeia. It's the neighing sound. Like when we go, neigh, like that's their version of that is Nahar. Nahar. So he's the neighing horse. And his name means neigh. Again, great creativity. Valaroma is Oromay's horn. So he's got his horse and he's got his great horn. Which isn't a conch shell like Ulmo's horns, but Vala meaning power, once again, like the Valar, and Roma is the onomatopoeia for a horn blast. So we go do 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 do, right? They go Roma. So that's an onomatopoeia in Quenya. Or maybe in Valorin, I'm not sure. I think it's in Quenya though. And so, yeah, it's powerful do-do-do-do horn. So this is how Tolkien tends to name things. He tends to be very descriptive with his names. If he can just describe it in one of his made-up or conlangs, he just does that and calls it a day. Lindir, he's a musician. His name literally means song guy. So you get a lot of that with Tolkien's fiction. If you understand the languages, most of the names are really descriptive and they're easier to remember. So let's do a quick review because there were a lot of words, okay? So Ainulindalë, Valaquenta. The Ainulindalë is the music of the Ainur, and the Valaquenta is the account of the Valar. These are the two stories that we read today. The heavenly beings, we have Eru, also known as Iluvatar. He is the One, or the All-Father, so he's the one god. The Ainur are his creatures that he makes from his thoughts. They are the holy ones. From the Ainur, if you break them into two different sects, you get the Valar and the Mayar. The Valar means the powers. Vala means power. So they are the powers of the world. And the Mayar are the beautiful ones. So they're not as powerful, typically. Not as powerful, but they're seen as more beautiful spirits, another subsect of the Ainur. Subsects of the Valar. The Valar, there are about 14 of them. There are 15 if you count Melkor, but 14 major Valar. From that, if you take the top 8, so if you narrow it down a little bit, you get the Aratar, which are called the High Ones. And these are the 8 of them. Manwe, Varda, Ulmo, Yavanna, Owle, Namo, Nienna, and Oromay. And we did go through all of these names. So if you want to try and remember, Manwe, also called Sulimo, he's the breather, so he's the god of air. Varda was the exalted one. She's the star lady, star queen, Elbereth. Ulmo, sea god. Yavanna, remember, Anna is gift, and Yahweh was fruit. So we've got the fruit giver, aka queen of the earth. Owle, his name means invention, so he is the craft god, or the god of, the earth, the elements. Namo is the judge. He's the god of the dead, also called Mandos, which is his dwelling, but that's the castle of custody. Nienna, which is Namo's sister. She's all about grief and learning wisdom through grief and loss. And then Oromay. Oromay being the hunter god. Right? Everybody, are you still with me? The Feyen Turi is another subgroup of the Valar, and it's just Namo, Irmo, and sometimes Nienna. all the siblings, because they are masters of the spirit, or the Feya. So Feyen Turi, think Feya. It means spirit. Again, the Mayar are the beautiful, we covered that. Alright, so on to the earthly beings. We only had 2 terms here, it's just the Eldar and the Noldor. The Eldar are the people of the stars, that is the elves, who actually go over to Valinor. We'll go more into subsects of the elves in the next stream, because that's when we will start to see a lot of that. Once we start reading the Silmarillion, it'll be either next week or the week after that. We'll probably hit all of the different subsections of the elves. And my goal is to have a visual aid to help you guys with that. So the Eldar are the people of the stars. Again, El. If you see El in anything, most of the time it means star. So this is star people. Nol is from the Ngol, or Nol. Nol. But that means wisdom and knowledge. So the Noldor are a section of the elves that are the people of knowledge. Specifically, the ones who got skills, okay? And their language is Quenya. Quenya is their native language. On to locations, we've got Ea, which is the universe, the whole big wide universe. Arda is the world, the entire world. Aman is like the continent, where the Blessed Land is, aka the Undying Lands. Valinor is a section within Aman, and that is the land of the Valar, whereas later on we have Valimar, which is the dwelling of the Valar. So again, when you see Val, you know that means power or the powers. So it has to do either with power and the seeking of power, like the Valaraukar, right? Those were the powerful monsters. But Valinor has to do with the Valar, and Nor is land, so it's the land of the Valar. Taniquetil is, or Taniquetil? I always say it wrong. Taniquetil. Taniquetil is the Snow White Peak, and that is the highest mountain in Arda, or the world, right? World. And that's where Manwë and Varda live. Oyalose is another name for that same mountain. It's Taniquetil or Oyalose. Lorlin is Dream Pool. Lore, and when you talk about Lorien, the actual location Lorien, that also has dream in it. So that's where we get these names from. So this is the Dream Pool, and inside this lake in the gardens is where Este sleeps. She sleeps on an island in the lake. Valimar is the dwelling of the Valar that I think of as more of a city or a realm inside Valinor. Valinor being like the big section of land that has various dwellings in it. Valmar is even more narrow. It's like the city. It's the city where most of the Valar live or congregate. Even if they don't live there, that's where they all hang out. It's where they all hang out. On to the characters. Manwë, Blessed One, also known as Breather, right? So he's the god of the air. Ulmo, the pourer, god of the seas. Owle, the inventor, he's the god of crafting and earth. But like earth as in moving elements around, right? So he's the one who made mountains. He's the one who makes metalwork later on, which is why the dwarves love him so much. Because he's got that same feel. They know him as Mahal in Khuzdul, which is the dwarvish language. Oromay, horn-blowing guy. Also known as Aldoron or Tauron, which means Lord of Forests. So this is the woodsman hunter guy, right? Namo is the judge from Nam. Mandos means castle of custody. That's his location. Irmo means master of desire or dreams. Lorien means land of dreams. Again, from that Lore, right? And just as a side note, Lothlorien is named after Lorien, but this is where Galadriel lives in the Third Age in Middle-earth. Loth is flower, so it's like flower dreamland. Not as good as the original, but it's the closest that Galadriel could do. Tulkas. Tulkas is our basic redneck fighter guy. Spoiling for a fight, ruddy complexion, golden hair. He likes to fight. He is steady and firm, and he laughs at the face of danger, right? Varda, sublime, exalted, she's the Star Queen. Feyen Turi, the Star Queen. Yavanna, we already went through this. Yave and Anna, together make giver of fruits. Toolclaw. Tolkas. No, it's Tulkas, sorry. Klaukas would be funny, though. Nienna is from Nie, so it's Lady of Tears. Este, rest. Vire, weaver. These just describe them. So, goddess of rest, goddess of weaving, goddess of tears, right? Goddess of beauty, if you want to get super basic, basic. And Nessa is young, or bride for Edis. So we don't get too many details about Vanna and Nessa. Nessa tends to dance. Nessa likes to dance. Nessa is married to Tulkas, so they are like my redneck couple, and I love them to pieces. So Tulkas is the guy who's going to be like arm wrestling people at the party, and Nessa's the one who's going to like get drunk and get on the table and take her shirt off while she's dancing. That's totally her. So that's the vibe I get from this married couple. They are having a lot of fun. All right, from the Mayar, we had Ilmare. She's the handmaid of Varda. Eonwe, we don't know what his name means, but he is the banner bearer of Manwe. Owle, we talked about him, loving the storms, making some mayhem. Uinen is the one who pulls him back in. So we've got Yang with the storms of Owle, and Yin with Uinen. She calms the storms. Melian we talked about. Her name means dear gift or love gift. And Aldoron, the Maya who then becomes Gandalf. And he's a guy of dreams and visions, which makes sense for his character. Bad guys, we got Melkor, aka Morgoth. So he who arises in might, he's the mighty guy, but he doesn't go by Melkor to the elves. The elves all call him Morgoth, Black Foe. Myron, again, doesn't go by Myron anymore, but his name originally meant the Admirable. The elves call him Sauron, or Gorthaur, but mostly Sauron. And when he has his second age, when he has his fair form on and he's trying to trick people, he goes under the name of Anatar. And we talked about the Vala Raukar. Again, Vala means power, Rauko, monster, so powerful monsters, aka the Balrogs. Then we got the Conkhorns, the Ulamuri, Nahar, which is the neighing horse, and Valaroma, which is the great powerful horns. It's the great powerful horn that is Oromay's horn. Okay. That is all. That is it, guys. We made it. So, like I said, there's a huge amount of vocabulary, especially with the Valaquenta, because that's when we hit all of the names of everything. The first few chapters of the Silmarillion are going to be very similar. They hit you with a lot of vocabulary, it's hard to pronounce, and it's really hard to get through. So we'll go chapter by chapter, and I will make sure that I have vocabulary for you guys, and we'll do this again. We'll go through it, so you guys will get a basic feel for what things mean in these languages, in Quenya and in Sindarin. Most of the names are in those two languages, and once you learn some of the roots, it's way easier to remember who these characters are. So that's what I'll be trying to help you guys do as we read along through it. So that, I believe, is all we have time for. How long have I been live? Almost 3 hours. I knew the vocabulary would take us a hot second. Hey, Delta, what is up? Welcome. We're just finishing up right now. But we just went through all the vocabulary for the Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta. Those are the two opening stories of the Silmarillion. We will, next week, start tackling the actual Quinta Silmarillion. So, I will show you guys what these look like. Oops, gotta turn that off. Bye, notepad. Oh, I'm on the wrong scene. My bad. Hold on, guys. Go away. Go away, notepad. There we go. Okay. So, this is the inside book cover. Zoom out a bit. So, J.R.R. Tolkien, we've got the Quinta Silmarillion, which is the main book. It's the main book inside here. The Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta are the two that we read today, the Music of the Ainur and the Account of the Valar. And after the Silmarillion, we have the Akalabath, which is the Fall of Numenor. And that is the Second Age. Everything before that is going to be prior to the First Age and the First Age. And then we have a small story here that talks about the Rings of Power and the Third Age. So we'll go through things basically chronologically. So we started here. We just did the Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta. So we will start next week on the Quinta Silmarillion. We'll start with the beginning of days, which is gonna be like a refresher course on what we just read today. And then we'll start going into the chapters that are about the specific Valar. Most importantly, Owle and Yavanna. We go way more into depth with them than we do with a lot of the other Valar. But it has meaning once you see where we're going with the plot over time. Again, this is a really difficult book to get through, so I'm here to help you guys. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me along the way. But let's see where we're going to start next time. Again, this beautiful, beautiful plates that we have in here. Okay, Valaquenta, Valaquenta, Valaquenta. Here we go. Quinta Silmarillion. So this is where we will be starting next stream. History of the Silmarils, or the Tale of the Silmarils. And this picture here is most likely Luthien Tinuviel, who's a character who will come, about 2/3 of the way through. She plays a really big role, though, in the Tale of the Silmarils. The Silmarils become an overarching theme. There are all these smaller stories, but they all have the Silmarils in common. So that's what we will be starting to read next week. So we'll start on the Silmarillion, and that will begin with the beginning of days. We got this beautiful preview. What a gorgeous painting. So I hope you guys enjoy all of these illustrations as we go along. I can't wait to share more with you. So I'm going to call it quits. I think that's where we're going to end everything. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love you. But we will tackle the Quinta Silmarillion starting next week, and we will do a little bit every week until we finish. If you miss any of these live streams, please feel free to either rewatch them here on Twitch. I will be setting them as highlights so you can follow them. Or if you prefer to follow me over on YouTube, I will be reposting these live streams over there as well as permalinks. Bravissimo. But there we go, Silmarillion. I can't wait to read more for you guys. I will see you guys next week. In the meantime, please stay well. I'm going to take another trip down to help my sister post-hospital stay for her, helping her with some follow-up appointments, but I will be back for next weekend. So I will see you guys next weekend for some of the Silmarillion. Everybody, please take care. I'll see you next time. Bye! Bye, guys.